Welcome back to the I Am Passionate podcast. I hope you all are having a great day. It's your host, Jaren, back here to cover week 7 of NFL action. So we're just going to dive into it because, we've got, the Thursday night game here tonight, and then we've got a couple other things to look forward to. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about 3 trades that I think would be good because the trade deadline is in a couple of weeks. And so I would say one of the more popular names to see traded, not the most popular, but one of the more popular, is Alvin Kamara. I'm not putting him on this list because I have a specific vision in mind. The first person I'd like to see would be the Jets running back, Breece Hall. If the Bears can make a trade for him, I would consider it. I think a backfield, a running back duo of, DeAndre Swift and Breece Hall would be a very, very good duo. I think that, the Bears' run game last week looked very good against the Commanders, and I think Breece Hall would only make the Bears' run game more consistent because I don't have the stats pulled in front of me. I know DeAndre Swift's, yards per carry is not the best, but Breece Hall is pretty much the only thing on the Jets' offense outside of Garrett Wilson that has, just looked, really, really good. And so, hey, the Jets might get rid of a couple, younger pieces to, then be able to get some draft picks so that, they can improve their team. Second on the list is Saints wide receiver Chris Olave. I have a specific team for him in mind that I think he would be a decent fit on. Now, do I want this team to make a trade for him? No, but I don't think it'd be a bad idea. I think if the Steelers can make a move for Chris Olave, it would not be the worst thing in the world. Because you got DK Metcalf, I understand you've got like Calvin Austin, but Steelers fans, let me know in the comments, aka my brother, let me know in the comments if how you feel about the Steelers wide receiver room, because DK Metcalf, yes, he's been getting a lot of touchdowns, this season, but I feel like he's your true consistent outside threat, and I feel like the Steelers need a second wide receiver, to, just to have that threat down the field. And I've kind of always viewed Chris Olave. He's a good route runner. He can, he kind of excels. He can do a little bit of everything. I feel like he's just good at everything. He's what you would want in a wide receiver. And then third, I would like to see the Bills make a move for the Titans defensive tackle, Jeffrey Simmons. Yes, the Bills have lost 2 in a row. And yes, the Bills' run defense has not been very good this season. I believe that if the Bills were to trade for Titans defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons, it will help their defense as a whole because I do not believe they will make it to the Super Bowl with their run defense being as bad as it is. Bijan Robinson put up basically 200 yards against them, and he's not the only running back this season who's had an amazing game against that Bills, run defense. Yeah, I don't think the Bills can afford to have a bad run defense going into the playoffs because if they have a bad run defense as the playoffs, like you're going to basically make Josh Allen put up 40 points in a game and he just cannot afford to make a mistake. Like one mistake could be the end all of the Bills season, which I understand you can say that about any team, but with a team who has Super Bowl aspirations like the Bills, you can play an amazing game, but if you make one mistake, it could be a mistake in the second quarter. And that one mistake in the second quarter could be ramifying enough for the Bills to lose the game. And yes, there are a couple other teams that you can say that for. So now moving on to week 6's top games. Number 1, I've got the Bears versus Commanders. I feel like this was a very, very good game. The Bears started out fast. Yes, they were settling for field goals early, which allowed the Commanders to, get back into this one. And I feel like Caleb Williams, he is showing improvement week to week. He's staying in the pocket. He's looking downfield. I feel like he's not holding on to the ball as often. He still has that problem, but it is nowhere near as bad as it was last season. The offensive line, it is definitely better, but they just commit so many penalties. The Bears, they commit so many penalties that, kind of derail their drives. Like on the, which when Caleb Williams threw that touchdown pass to Rome Odunze, which it got called back because the left tackle was considered legal formation, which I'm like, I disagree with that. And also, I thought it was going to get called back anyways because I thought they were going to call Rome Odunze for offensive pass interference, but they never did. But I think if, the Bears are able to cut down on the penalties, I think the Bears' future would be looking really, really bright if they do. The Commanders, yes, they were without Scary Terry McLaurin, but they still had a decent game. The Bears' defense just forced, they forced two fumbles, which really they really only forced really one, that early one on the you know Commanders rookie running back, and the one late in the game was, yes, it was a fumble, that the Bears recovered, but it was more so from the bad weather. But overall, I don't think the Commanders, we'll just say outside of the first two turnovers, I don't think they played all that bad. I don't think they played amazing, but I don't think they played that bad. Second on this list, I'm going to say the Bucks versus the 49ers. I've already said multiple times on the podcast this season that Baker Mayfield, he's an MVP level. He's putting together major games with, missing. In his last game, Ekbuka got hurt. Ekbuka, sorry, I was making sure I said his name correctly. But Emeka, he had gotten hurt. Chris Godwin, hurt. Mike Evans hurt. Bucky Irvin hurt. You're missing your top three guys. You're missing your top weapons on offense, and yet you're still putting together great performances. And so I'm aware the 49ers team is hurt, but they are a well coached team and has kept them in games. Nobody expected Mac Jones to play as well as he has. And the thing is, like, he didn't play like the world's worst football game against the Bucks. Like that, pretty much game clinching interception. He did get fooled. The Buccaneers disguised that coverage very, very well. But I don't think he played horrible to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, Mac Jones is crumbling, 49ers fans panic. I don't think he's playing like that. I think Mac Jones is playing fine, especially in his backup role as of right now. Number three, Panthers versus Cowboys. I called it when saying that it could be a trap game for the Cowboys. I should have stuck with my gut in saying I thought the Panthers were going to win last week because I knew the possibility was there. Rico Dowdle just two straight games with 200 plus scrimmage yards. He is balling, and he might take the starting running back job from Chuba Hubbard because Hubbard has been out from injury, and also Dak and George Pickens. George Pickens, I believe, is in the top three of receiving yards. That duo is just insane. Number four, I'm gonna say the Colts versus the Cardinals. The Cardinals in the third quarter, they jumped out. They got two touchdowns, which was like scary hours for the Colts. And then, the Colts, had a great fourth quarter. Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor just playing amazing this season, which, the Daniel Jones, I will say until the end of the season, will always surprise me. But the thing is, even if the Colts had lost last week, it was to an NFC team, which would not have been as bad because, the Colts being an AFC team. And then last, I'm going to say the Packers versus the Bengals. I'm aware that this is a weird pick, but I'm going to put this game on here because I thought the Bengals were going to get blown out. They still are struggling to put together, a lot of offense, but they still did have their chances to win that game. And so moving on to talk about my prediction record and Kevin's, because this was the first, last week's episode was the first, collaboration episode I've had during this NFL season. I had a pretty good week last week with a 10-4 overall record. Kevin also being 10-4, which, if I had, any of these records wrong, Kevin, put them in the comments down below. I appreciate it. So with, for me, overall, I have a 53-37-1 record. Week 1, I was 10-5. Week 2, I was 13-3. Week 3, I was 6-10. Week 4, I was 8-7-1. Week 5, I was 6-8, and last week I was 10-4. Once I get to the end of the season, I will go back and tally just to make sure that I have all of these records correct, because I'm aware, at least for the week 1 game, those totals might not exactly match the way that they should. But I'm definitely going to go back and double check once this, NFL regular season is over. But with the wins I had, the Rams, Bears, Steelers, Patriots, Chargers, Packers, Bucks, Colts, Seattle, and the Broncos. And the losses I had were the Eagles, Titans, Lions, and Bills. So that's enough about last week. We're going to move on to this week's action. Let me know what you all think of the NFL season so far down below in the comments. I've been saying it also. I think that this has been a weird NFL season, and I think the trend is going to continue tonight as another AFC North battle, but it's on prime time as the Steelers take on the Bengals. So I was kind of looking into, the Steelers and Bengals recent history because when I think of recent history, the Steelers had always, beaten the Ravens. I understand last season being, different. Like they just had a crazy win streak. The Steelers would kind of trade with the Bengals. The Ravens and Bengals, they had the 1 year where the Ravens could not beat the Bengals, but then, since that the Ravens have pretty much beaten the Bengals. The AFC North division in the last 5 years had just been pretty weird in terms of like, oh, you think this team would win, but then in reality, it's the opposite team. Which any given Sunday, any given Thursday in this instance, any given Monday, that's always a thing. That's one of the things I've known since I was younger. And so for the Steelers injury report, wide receiver Calvin Austin and defensive back Miles Killebrew are out, and then Deshaun Elliott and Malik Harrison are questionable. Important for, the Steelers defense, Cam Hayward and Jalen Ramsey are active. DK Metcalf and Aaron Rodgers are active, so that'll be good for them. And for the Bengals, the main piece I would say that they are missing is Mike Gesicki, which Mike Gesicki did put together a couple of good games last season against the Steelers. So I would not be surprised if Noah Fant, has a, bigger role tonight, but we will see. And, Trey Hendrickson on the Bengals defense is a game time decision. So pretty much won't really know until basically, let's just say, an hour before kickoff, hour or two. So score prediction, I think this game is going to be closer than expected. AFC North football always is at least competitive. I'm going to pick the Steelers to win 24-20 because I believe Aaron Rodgers will take better care of the football than Joe Flacco. Moving on to the Rams versus Jags. The biggest story of this game is that Puka Nacua is likely to miss this game after getting injured against the Ravens last week. Puka is easily, I don't care what anybody says, the best receiver in football right now. Before this injury, he was on pace to have 2,000 yards. And then I understand that likely, let's just say, even if he misses just this game, he's likely not going to get that 2K mark. I mean, he'll still have a chance if he's able to put together like a 200-yard game in the future. But the Rams last week, they played a little sloppy against my Ravens. They did. Like, the fact that it was a 3-3 game for so long, like, I was literally surprised. I literally picked the Rams to destroy the Ravens last week. And the Ravens had chances to win. They did. But they just could not capitalize. And the thing is, if the Ravens would have beaten the Rams last week with backups, one, that's huge for the Ravens, and two, it's kind of bad for the Rams, even like to lose to a depleted Ravens team. But I think for the Rams this week, they're going to have to rely a bit more on Kyren Williams and Devontae Adams, which I'm saying rely a bit more is because Puka Nacua was putting up video game numbers. And, Kyren Williams is having a good season. Devontae Adams is, putting up respectable numbers, and he'll always be a respectable name in the NFL. But I think that those two are going to have to be who Stafford leans on to kind of put up those video game numbers in Puka Nacua's absence. While the Jags, they played a competitive game last week, but special teams did not really help. They had, they scored 12 points, but their kicker did not really have the best of games, and that didn't necessarily derail the game. Like that, I mean, like, the kicker did not lose them the game, but he certainly did not help them win the game, if that makes sense. I'm going to pick the Rams to win this one, 27-24, because I do believe, Matt Stafford and that Rams offense will still be able to put up good numbers, even though the Jags play very, very well in London. Like, that's basically their second home field. Moving on to the Eagles versus the Vikings. The Eagles have lost 2 straight. They lost to the Giants, which that offense looked terrible. Oh my God. Like, earlier in the season, like on this podcast, I talked about how it just did not seem like the Eagles offense was trying very hard. And like, I feel like I'm right, but at the same time, I'm not. I'm aware they've got a different offensive coordinator, different play caller. And so that quite literally will just be the thing that holds the Eagles back at this point. Where like, you having your offensive coordinators take jobs elsewhere, and it just hurts the team, which like, they've got the group. They've got one of the best offenses from personnel wise in the NFL, in my opinion. But you're only as good as your play caller. Like if your play caller can't put you in an advantage in a good situation, it's hard to really showcase just how good you can be. Um, the defense has kept them in most of their games this season. I say most, even though that the defense is not why they lost to the Giants. It was more so because of the offense, in my opinion. The Vikings, I think this game was much more important to the Vikings. Even if the Eagles somehow lose 3 in a row, I still believe that they are the best team in the NFC East. But the Vikings are not the clear-cut best team in the NFC North. And the other thing is, I think they've got a quarterback problem. Me, Kevin, and my brother, we were talking yesterday as we were playing video games that JJ McCarthy's only basically played 3 games, and they were all this year. And the thing is, he has not really looked good outside of the fourth quarter against the Bears. So I understand that people are likely going to say, be patient with JJ McCarthy, but something Kevin said last night that I agree is I don't really want to hear that. It could be moving in the direction that JJ McCarthy could have been a wasted pick. Imagine this team with Sam Darnold right now. He's balling in Seattle. Balling. And yeah, picking JJ McCarthy could have been a wasted pick when they could have, addressed what they needed in the first round last season. Give me the Eagles to win this game, though, 31-23. I believe that both teams will have a good game, but I'm going to pick the Eagles to play a little bit better. Moving on to the Patriots versus the Titans, I'm going to ask the question, is this a revenge game for Mike Vrabel because he is the former head coach of the Titans? The Patriots, they're one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. They've won 3 in a row. They're in first in the division. And so I think that's, huge. And also live in this podcast, Kevin texted that he's been hating on Fields today. He's going to send something later, which that's a story for a different day. And so moving on, the Patriots, they're in first place. Drake May and the Patriots as a whole, they're playing great football. So for the Titans, they have fired Bryce Callahan, their head coach. Not a surprise to almost anyone. And so the last 3 number 1 overall picks lost their head coach during the season. Bryce Young, the first head coach was Frank Reich. He got fired. Last season, Caleb Williams had Matt Eberflus. He got fired. And now Brian Callahan getting fired with Cam Ward. I don't think this is going to be too much of a game. Give me the Patriots to win this one 44-10. Moving on to the Panthers versus Jets. This is the weirdest game of the week. Yes, I look at my script a little bit as I'm recording my podcast, but I try not to read off of my script. And so for this, I'm going to close my eyes. The Panthers are the road team in this game. And so I said it last week when I was on a podcast with Kevin. At home, the Panthers undefeated. They got the win against the Cowboys last week at home. But on the road, they look like a JV team. They just look terrible on the freaking road. I don't know what it is. I don't know why, what they do at home does not translate to on the road. At least some of it, I don't know. And so the Jets, they have not, outside of week 1, they have not looked good. Yes, they had a chance to beat the Bucs in, I think, week 3. But Baker Mayfield, you all know how I feel about him this season. And so the Jets are just not looking very, very good. They're just not. I am a little surprised Justin Fields has not been benched this season, which this is going to be Kevin's favorite part of the episode. It's just Justin Fields, yes, he has not thrown an interception, but I feel like sometimes he just does not find the open man, or he'll have somebody who's wide open. He just does not throw it to him. And I don't know, his accuracy is just so inconsistent. I almost dropped my phone, but I was able to catch it. # former football player. I don't know. If I truly believe this game will determine, will the Panthers keep their trend of just being terrible on the road and good at home? Because if they're terrible on the road, that opens the door for the Jets. But the Panthers are the better team, not even just from record-wise. I think their roster is a bit better constructed. This game will literally is a coin flip. Which version of the Panthers we're getting. I'm going to take the Panthers to win this one 21-7. I believe Rico Dowdle. I don't think he's going to put up 200 yards against the Jets, but I do think he's going to have another good game. I would not be surprised if the Jets start, 0-7, if they make a trade to not to save this season, but to just start stocking up on draft picks. Moving on to the Dolphins versus the Browns. Both of these teams are also in an awkward situation. I say that because Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski and Dolphins head coach Mike Macdonald, they're in danger of getting fired. They are. Like, you know, it's kind of crazy to think about it because, you know, at least on the Browns side, I believe Stefanski has won Coach of the Year twice. And, you know, McDonald, you know, he just started out really, really well in Miami. Then he, you know, kind of has, we'll say, fizzled out. Like, I don't know the proper word to use. The Browns, they're entering their second week with Dillon Gabriel. And so I think he's got a bit more of a favorable matchup, even though the Dolphins have a good pass defense, which surprises me personally. I think that Dillon Gabriel has at least a better chance to be set up for success this week compared to weeks past, well, aka last week when they played against the Steelers. The Dolphins, they had a chance to beat the Chargers. I feel like this season will quite literally just be the Dolphins have a chance to have beaten a lot of teams, but Tua throws an interception at the worst possible time. He threw 3 interceptions last week. I saw on TikTok, basically there is a TikToker by the name of, his name is Nico, but his @ is Elite Takes. You can find him on like TikTok, Twitter. I'm sure you can probably find him on Instagram. I enjoy the content he makes very, very much, and I think it's really, really cool because a couple weeks ago he was on like CBS talking to Matt Ryan about, you know, his own, you know, like personal takes, and it would be really, really cool if someday I have the chance to do something like that. Even though that as a career, I would like to be able to be at like the halftime table during an NFL game, like how Matt Ryan, James Brown, or Colin, if I was to go to Fox, you know, basically Michael Strahan, you know, he's just the first name that came out to mind in Fox, or NBC. You've got, you know, Maria Taylor, you've got Jason Garrett, you've got Chris Sims. I would like to be in that position someday, or even a sideline reporter. But enough rambling about me. I think the Dolphins, by the end of the season, I would be very, very surprised if the Dolphins do not draft a quarterback. And like, I understand Tua's contract is insane. It's going to be hard to get rid of Tua, but I think they're going to find a way, or they're just going to be like, you know what, we're just going to eat this dead cap, which I have no idea what his dead cap situation would even look like. But give me the Browns to get a win, 16-13. So moving on to the Saints versus Bears. This is an important game for the Bears, but not in the way you're thinking. Do you remember when I was basically saying for the Broncos that how you can't beat the undefeated Eagles, but then lose to the Jets? Which the thing is, they almost did lose to the Jets. I understand the Commanders were not undefeated, but they are still a good team. You can't, you know, beat the Commanders, then lose to the Saints. And so, like I mentioned early in the podcast episode, I do believe that if the Bears offense can cut down on the penalties, I think they'll be a team to watch. You know, they can upset some teams. They can drastically affect the NFC playoff picture, in my opinion. The Saints, they're just showing fight. They're showing fight, even though that a lot of, like, basically Chris Olave, like I had mentioned, Alvin Kamara, they're in talks of being traded. They are. But they are continuing to fight. And, you know, last week they had some opportunities, but they could not really punch the ball in the end zone. But for this game, I'm going to take the Saints to lose. You thought I was going to say win. I'm going to take the Bears to win this one 24-13. Moving on to the Raiders versus the Chiefs. I don't really have too much to say about this game, but my thought process is the Raiders season outside of week 1 has just been interception, Geno Smith, intercepted. That has quite literally been their season. He leads the NFL with, I believe, 9 interceptions, which is insane. If there's any game to give Geno Smith his confidence back, it would be against the Chiefs. It would. But if there's a game that's like, you know what, the Raiders are going to, you know, mess around and, you know, bench Geno Smith, it would be after this performance. The Chiefs, they'll have Rashee Rice back. Their offense will be at full strength, and we'll see what they get to look like with, you know, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Hollywood Brown. Which, you know, their offense, the Chiefs' offense was starting to slowly pick up as they've gotten healthier. And now we will have the chance to see what, I guess, the Chiefs 2.0 offense will look like. When I say Chiefs 2.0, when I think of the Chiefs' offense at their best, I do think of when they had Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, that wide receiver room. That's why I'm saying, will this be the Chiefs 2.0? But I don't expect this performance the Chiefs may or may not have to indicate just how good this offense will be, because it's the Raiders. It's the Raiders. They've only had one good game this season. They don't have that good of a team anyways. Give me the Chiefs to win this one 38-22. Moving on to the Colts versus Chargers. This is a huge game. Like, huge. I understand this is early in the season, but this is huge for playoff implications. I say that because the Colts right now are sitting at the 1 seed with a 5-1 record. The Steelers, I believe, are like right behind at 4-2, Chargers and Patriots. So basically, the gap between the 1 seed and the basically is like separated by 1 game. And so if the Chargers win this game, they'll likely be the 1 seed. Kind of depends on if the Steelers win and also like other tiebreakers that, are taken into play. But if the Colts win, not really much will change. It just kind of depends on, basically the seeds to like the division leader seeds, like 2 to 4 will change and potentially wild cards. So this could really shape up the playoff picture on the AFC side, because whoever wins this obviously holds the tiebreaker. The Chargers offense, they did look better against Miami. The last 2 weeks previously, the Chargers offensive line was just not protecting Justin Herbert, but he only got sacked 1 time, and, Justin Herbert, he was able to put together a good game. And so for the Colts, they were in a little bit of a, we'll say, scary game against the Cardinals. Third quarter, they let out 2 touchdowns, but in the fourth quarter, Indiana Jones and Jonathan Taylor, they just balled out. So I think, something that I'm considering what this game is going to go down to is I do believe that Jonathan Taylor is the best running back the Chargers will have faced this season. And so I believe that this game starts and ends with Jonathan Taylor. If the Colts are able to keep Jonathan Taylor going just like how he has been the entire season, I think they'll win. But if the Chargers lock in and force Indiana Jones to throw, I'm aware his name is Daniel Jones. I'm just calling him Indiana Jones because it's funny. Then, I think you got a chance. But I am going to take the Chargers to get the win, 27-21. Moving on to the Giants versus Broncos. I don't have much to say about this game either. I'm aware I've said that for the last few, but it's simply just because I think how good Jackson Dart looked against the Eagles. I don't think he's going to look that good against the Broncos. I don't think he's going to have the time to run around and scramble. I think the Broncos are going to have a QB spy pretty much the entire game, and I believe they're going to make Jackson Dart have to throw the football. I think Cam Scatterboo is not going to put up another 3-touchdown performance. I don't think he'll have an efficient game this week. I really don't, because I just think the Broncos defense is that good. And I think also the Broncos, they had a sloppy game against the Jets, but they were able to get it done. They got the win. And so this weekend, it's going Demaryius Thomas, rest in peace to Demaryius Thomas. He will be inducted into the Broncos Ring of Honor, which I believe is going to be enough to motivate the entire Broncos team for them to get the win, 28-10. So, kind of in the 3 o'clock slot of games, we got the Packers versus Cardinals. Honestly, whenever I think of these two teams, I want to say the year the Cardinals went to the Super Bowl against the Steelers. The Cardinals and Packers had a shootout where I think the Cardinals won in overtime like 51-45. And then the season with, Aaron Rodgers throwing all them Hail Marys. He threw one against the Lions early in that year. I was like, he just turned 32 yesterday. Does he have another vintage moment in him? And then, later that season, the Cardinals, who in 2015, they looked pretty good until they ran into Cam Newton. But, they threw a Hail Mary. The Packers threw a Hail Mary to get into that game. Jeff Janis, I believe, is the one who caught it. And then in overtime, Larry Fitzgerald just went God mode. Like, enough said. But the Packers, I think they still need to keep winning games just because, to stay ahead of the Lions. I know the winning games part is stating the obvious. But the Packers, the NFC North, at least in terms of whoever ends up winning the division, it's in an awkward place because the Packers have that tie. So I'm wondering, though, if this would be a trap game. I want to say that, the Packers have, the favorable matchup. But I think, this is a trap game, kind of like how I thought the Panthers and Cowboys would have been a trap game. Simply just because, I feel like certain NFC teams will always play in like a closer game than it needs to be. And my gut is telling me that this is a game the Packers need to watch out. This is a game that maybe come playoff time we're like, dang, this is the one game that we let get away from us. But I think the Packers will get the win 26-23. Moving on to the Commanders and Cowboys. I'm anticipating this game to be a shootout because of how bad the Cowboys defense is. Now, like, yes, their run defense is improved, which it was Jerry Jones' point. And, like, also, if you were to look at the stats between Kenny Clark and Micah Parsons, their stats aren't all that different. Micah Parsons is out to a slower start, but I still think them trading him was kind of stupid, but that's beside the point right now. The Commanders, they had a chance to beat the Bears last week. Like, they did. I really actually thought they were going to win. I did not expect that fumble to happen the way that it happened. And also, when it was clear that, in the final 2 minutes, the Bears were just going to run the ball to get in the field goal range and the Commanders are playing for a pass, I was like, yeah, they are just not as prepared as they could be in this situation. So, the Cowboys offense, they might get CeeDee Lamb back, but the thing is, I think whether they do or don't, I still think the connection between Dak and George Pickens is going to be electric. Like, I would not be surprised if George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb both have like a top 10, top 15 season at wide receiver based off of just how well the Cowboys passing offense is. But I'm going to take the Commanders to win this one 38-30. So we've got 3 games left. We have the Sunday Night Football game between the Falcons versus 49ers. I think this is going to be a very good, Sunday Night Football game. Bijan Robinson, the Falcons running back, he could be the best running back in football right now, like this season. Like, he is Christian McCaffrey 2.0. Like, it's like if he doesn't get 100 yards rushing, he'll definitely get 100 yards receiving. And so, like, last season when people were picking Bijan Robinson first, I was like, I don't know. But this season is definitely warranted. And I would guarantee, like, it is October 16th, 2025 at 3:24 p.m. Next season, I would bet Bijan Robinson is pick number 1 in most fantasy football leagues. But hey, that's beside the point. And so, Michael Penix and the Falcons defense has been playing very, very well. That Falcons defense has a top 10 unit in like every statistical category. And I believe I saw it on TikTok where the Falcons defense has not allowed a 200-yard passer, a 100-yard rusher, or a 100-yard receiver. That is insane in today's NFL world. That is insane. And Mac Jones last week, switching to the 49ers, I think they'll stay in any game because they had their chances to win last week against the Buccaneers. And Mac Jones, he had his worst game, but the thing is, that game that he played last week was not that bad. And the thing is, the Falcons defense is really good. So I think this has the potential to be his outright worst game of the season so far, where like it's undisputed that like, okay, Mac Jones did not play well against the Falcons defense. Give me the Falcons to get the win 34-24. Finally, we got the Monday night doubleheader, which I think in this Monday Night Football instance, where it's like we've got I think what'll be good games, and it's like, dang, like I understand with like different streaming services or like YouTube TV, for example, you could watch both games at the same time, but for people who do not have that, and they kind of have to pick one where it's like, dang, like just where they're torn. So it's gonna suck if you're not somebody who can basically stream both at the same time. And so for the Bucks and Lions, I think this is a battle of who's the bigger dog. Like, who's the bigger dog? Both of these offenses are amazing, and I truly believe that this game will go down to whoever has the ball last. If Jared Goff and the Lions have the ball last, I think they can get the win. But in the same vein, if Baker Mayfield and the Bucks offense has the ball last, I think they can get the win. But also, like to mention with like Baker Mayfield and the MVP race, 4 of the 6 teams that the Bucks have beaten have very good defenses, which I think does help his case with MVP. Dak Prescott being in the conversation, I think that Dak Prescott will likely have the stats to be an MVP, but I think the disparity between the Cowboys record and the Bucks record will be what does not get him the MVP. And so the Lions, not 100% sure if they're going to have Brian Branch, because I know that he is trying to appeal him being suspended for this upcoming game. The Lions secondary is still beat up, but here's the thing. The Bucs wide receivers are just as beat up, so you'll kind of have to see who has the advantage between a beat up Lions secondary versus a beat up, Buccaneers wide receiving core. But I'm going to take the Bucs to win this one 41-38. And then the final game of this week, we have Texans versus Seattle. I think this game is going to be a very defensive football game, as both of these teams have very good defenses. And so I think this game is more important to the Texans. They had a bye week last week, and 2 weeks ago they, destroyed the Ravens. And so they're behind the Colts and Jaguars. And I just truly believe that if they get any further behind, it's not going to help their case to make the playoffs. Like, they will need to have extreme luck. Seattle, they've been playing very, very well. And, each week Sam Darnold is proving that, the contract that he got to come be Seattle's quarterback, it was a good investment, especially when you look at how bad Geno Smith is playing for the Raiders. But I'm going to take Seattle to win this game 27-17. That is all I have for this episode of the I Am Passionate podcast. I'm your host, Jaren Smith, and I'll see you all later.